Would you be willing to start all over at age 50? What if you didn't have a choice, but what you gained was clarity, confidence, and a completely new beginning? Today's guest shows us how life's hardest transitions can become our greatest assets. I'm Karen Maurer, Wealth Advisor with Krilogy Financial. Here at Her Next Chapter, we talk about how to help women financially and emotionally plan for, live through, and thrive during life's transitions. We want to come out with a new beginning with clarity and confidence. I'm thrilled to welcome today's guest, Amy Lemire. Amy is the president and CEO of AIM Training and Consulting, where she helps businesses accelerate sales, elevate performance, and amplify success. Her story also includes navigating divorce, starting a business, moving back to St. Louis after 14 years in Chicago, and meeting someone new at age 50. Amy, welcome to Her Next Chapter. So glad you're here.
Karen, thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. I'm excited to hear all about your transition. We've known each other professionally and personally for a while now, and I appreciate you coming on board and sharing your transition. So why don't you start and take us back a few years?
Sure. So I look back at 2018 and 2019, and when I speak about this, I say it was my trifecta year because I made a lot of big changes that started off with me first going through a program that got me to see and understand my thought habits. And I began to realize that I was stuck in a lot of areas in my life, and I didn't really think about it as being stuck. At that time, I remember just thinking, this is the way life is when you get older. You lose passion for the work you do. You lose passion for the relationship. But I always say that I was really confronted with making some decisions, and that decision got me to see that the relationship I was in was no longer serving me, and I think also my spouse at the time. And also, I really wanted to be back in St. Louis, my hometown, as my family's here. It's my roots. And then, last but not least, I really have always had this dream of running my own business. And I got the opportunity to really start digging into that in that year.
And so that opportunity came up before you came back to St. Louis, or was it while you were still out of town?
Yes, I was still living outside Chicago in the northwestern suburbs, and I had taken a program about thought habits called Habit Finder. And in that program, what happened is that when I saw that I was a little bit stuck, I realized a lot of the problem was I didn't have very healthy boundaries. I said a lot of yeses when I wanted to say no. To this day, I'm still a recovering people pleaser. But what I decided to do is to really take my self-confidence head on and work on it. And what came of that, to answer your question, is that after I went through that program and decided to make some of these changes, it was like the light bulb went off. And I thought to myself, I need to teach this to other people, other women, because I think a lot of us go through life sometimes feeling like this is the way it should be. It's okay not to be happy. It's okay to be self-sacrificing. And when I learned that it doesn't have to be that way, I got certified as a coach in that in 2018 and started doing these coaching groups before I moved back to St. Louis.
Oh, okay. So take me back to going to this Habit Finder. Was it something that you sought out yourself, or did somebody suggest it to you? I'm really interested in, things that you learned there. I do think that people kind of get stuck in that rut and don't even realize that they are where they are, or that they've created the habits that they have, or we kind of are going through life blindly sometimes. So what even prompted you to do that from the beginning? Did you seek that out?
Yeah, I have a belief that everything happens for a reason, and that reason is to serve us. And it was interesting because it was just a random invitation I got from a woman that I met when I was speaking, and it was going to be an evening about women and leadership. She was hosting at her house, and I thought, okay, why not? It was Friday night. I didn't have anything else going on, and as I drove there, I just remember thinking about my week. I was tired of the job I was in, just kind of self-reflecting, again, on feeling unfulfilled. And then once I got there, they started talking about how they wanted to help other women who felt called to take their lives to the next level. So I thought, okay, I just grabbed my credit card out, signed up for the class. I didn't really think anything about it. I just thought...
Just kind of did it, huh?
I was there for the right reason at the right time. Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Didn't have any idea what I was really getting into.
Wow. And so from there, that kind of prompted you to do some reflection and to make some big, major changes. The trifecta.
Absolutely. And I remember one of the first questions the coach asked me got me to see, and I think this is a question for all this audience, is really think about who or what is draining me emotionally, spiritually, financially. And she asked me that question, and I realized at that time it was the relationship I was in. And it was the first time I had really confessed that to the universe. And that's when I realized it was time to really take a look at everything in my life that wasn't working and bringing happiness. And that's kind of where it started.
Yeah. That confession to the universe always makes a big difference. That accountability, saying it out loud. I know when I've made major life changes, I usually verbalize it to somebody, even, whether it's a goal or, an actual shift in something. Because once I say it out loud, I want to stick with that commitment and I want to move forward with it. So I think that always makes a huge difference. And I think when you go back and look at those habits that you're in, the courage to make that change, where did you find the courage to shift?
The courage, I think really, that story probably goes back to when I was 9. I'm a survivor. I was almost killed by a drunk driver when I was 9 years old outside Six Flags. And I think that at age 9, one of the first things that happened is my grandmother gave me a book called Determination, the story of Helen Keller. And I didn't really know what the word courage was or determination was, but I remember reading that book and realizing that, we have the power to change how we look at the world and to change how we think. Back then, I didn't think much of it. So that's where a lot of that courage and self-determination came from. But little did I know back then that it would affect my life in the future like it did in 2018 and 19.
Well, and how much it's probably carried you through things you didn't even realize that it did.
Yes.
And if your grandmother knew how impactful that book was for your whole life.
Thank you, yes.
Yes, that's amazing. So you come back to St. Louis and you're ready to start fresh and start new. What did that look like?
Well, I was thinking about this, Karen, this morning before I came here because I remember one of the first things that I did. It was great to be home. It was great to be with my friends and family. But I remember going to a meeting of a certain group, and I remember after the meeting I got in my car and I just cried because it was a certain association that meets throughout the United States, and it wasn't the same people, it wasn't the same energy, it wasn't the same vibration.
Yeah.
And that's when I really realized how difficult it was just to pick up and leave a place where you've been for 14 years because I've changed, this town has changed, my friends have changed, my family, people, everything is different now. So that's really when I realized I was really starting a lot of that over again.
You felt like an outsider in your own home, thinking you're coming home again. You know what, I've lived in St. Louis my whole life, and I've always wondered what it would be like to leave. And to hear you say that coming home again didn't feel like coming home,
right?
I mean, that's really profound. That's scary.
Yes.
What did you do? How do you close that old chapter and start that new chapter?
So part of what I did is I really practiced what I preach because in the coaching that I do, I help people see that we always have a choice. We have a choice we live in one of three places. We either live in the past, which is where we feel regret or should have, could have, would have been like this, or we're anxiety and fear ridden over the future. But the one place that we forget to be in is the now. And I think I just chose that, I'm going to surround myself with my friends, my family. Now, this was right before the pandemic also. And I just began to get out and network and get involved and make new friends. And then I started doing coaching groups. And that's where, little by little, I started feeling more like I was at home again. So
was the coaching part of what you were doing back in Chicago, or did that start new? Yes. Was that something new? It was the same coaching. It was habit finder coaching. So really based on the premise that our thoughts drive our habits drive our actions, and our actions drive our results. So I've done over 50 groups since 2018 to today. The only real difference between what I was doing back then and what I'm doing now is now I've also brought in 10 sales skills into the program. Okay. So I seem to be working a little more with people that are in either sales roles or business development roles or people whose livelihood depends on getting more clients or making more sales. Okay. And that's different than your original groups, which were more just non-sales oriented people. Right. It was, in the beginning, it was mostly
it seemed I primarily attract women. I have had men in my program, and I love men and women either way.
Sure.
But it seemed like in the beginning it was mostly women that wanted to work on their self-confidence and working through hardships, challenges, and other setbacks they had gone through.
And do you find that women going through those types of challenges, that self-confidence really is the driving force that helps it be a successful transition or not?
I do. I believe that, and from doing like thousands of the assessments, so Habit Finder is also an assessment people can take online. It's free.
Okay.
But from looking at thousands of these, the one habit out of 6 that I think we as a human race seem to struggle with the most is self-confidence. And it's mostly because, again, we are in that past, thinking about events, or we might say things to ourselves. We might have had a tough childhood. There's a lot of reasons, trauma. There's a lot of reasons that we do that, but it seems to be one of the mind's natural tendencies is to go back to that place a lot. So we're helping people find those gifts in those past experiences and let that empower us to be who we are today so that we can serve other people, whether it's sales or business or a homemaker. It really doesn't matter what your profession is, but we're focusing on the present now is what we're doing with those thought habits.
I have never looked at self-confidence as a habit.
Yeah.
So I love reframing that, and I've never looked at it as something that, I mean, obviously it's something that you grow into or grow out of or whatever your transition is, but I've never looked at it as that habit that maybe you're tying it back to something and you don't even realize that that's where it's coming from. That's fascinating. So so this is coaching, not therapy. This is
correct.
Learning new habits, not laying on the couch, divulging, your deepest, darkest. So it sounds like it's really empowering people to take this journey for themselves, but with a guide, with a coach.
Correct. I actually got an email from somebody who is a psychotherapist, and she said, I really appreciate your CBT, and I didn't even know what she meant, but I guess that's cognitive behavior therapy. And so it's really about asking questions and supporting people to examine their ways of thinking. So I've never thought of it that way, and I'm more of a coach, but
right.
But I think what I'll say is that I think when people feel safe and they feel like they can trust someone and they share what they share, I mean, confidentiality is probably my highest value in the work I do. So I always remind everyone that what's said here stays here. This is a safe place, because I think that's the first step of change is awareness and speaking about the things that you want to see different in your life.
Right. So is the coaching one-on-one or is it group coaching?
I do both. That's a great question, Karen. So I do one-on-one coaching and then I do group coaching. The trainer and teacher in me, I probably do more groups than one-on-one, but I do both.
Mm-hmm. And so with the group, you're guiding people through their own individual journeys, though, kind of all at the same time.
Correct. I follow, I'm a big stickler for process, and including sales process. So even when I coach, I have a lesson plan and a program. So it's actually a program and a whole binder and these 6 habits. So that way I'm repeating and I'm staying consistent with what I'm talking about.
Right.
But every experience for each person, of course, is going to be different, whether it's one-on-one or a group. Everyone has their own personality, so that's where the magic happens. I think.
Is everybody kind of discovering that? Mm-hmm. And then do they have some type of an accountability program, or how do they go back and say, yes, I've actually kind of gone through this transition, gotten rid of the old habits, created new ones, and then, but how do they account for that or stick with that program? Because I think that's, it's like starting off your New Year's resolutions, and we tend to do it great for 30 days and then fall off the map.
That's a great question, Karen. So what we do in our program is in our group programs, we do assign accountability buddies. And I don't force people to check in. We'll just friendly nudge.
Sure.
Please check in with your buddy. And then when we do one-on-one work, what we also do is we call it bonus work, not homework. So it might be read this or do this, and then on the next call, ask that person, hey, how did that go? And if they say, I didn't do it, okay, tell me more about that. That's how we hold each other accountable, because I believe accountability is what we do when no one else is watching. And then when we finish the program, to make sure people get the ROI, they retake that assessment to see how their habits have shifted. And then we also do a debrief to talk about, okay, your 3 goals at the beginning were A, B, and C. how do we do on that? So we really want to make sure that there's closure and that people feel like, okay, I got what I paid for, not just with their money, but with their time. They really did the work.
How much time is invested in doing something like this?
Sure. So when I work with people one-on-one, I find it's most effective to do 6 months because it's basically, so it's about 10 to 12 sessions and 2 hours a month or so. And then, they say change takes, I believe change, whether you're talking about behavior change or learning a sales skill or something different, I really think it does take more than 90 days. I think it takes up to 6 months to really see it. When I do my group programs, though, those are a little bit faster. Those are 90 days. So we meet once a week for an hour. So that's a little bit more rapid fire, whereas the individual program is a little bit longer.
Okay. Can you share with us, without divulging any confidential information, any type of transitions or transformations that you've seen somebody make, like a habit that they've changed, and what results come from that?
Yes, I think one of the biggest transitions that, there's so many to think about, but I think one of the ones that still really just inspires me, and it was one of the first coaching groups I did, is it was someone that she had moved here back to St. Louis, similar to me, but she left a job, just really tired, really burned out, didn't know what she wanted to do the rest of her life, and we started talking about things she enjoyed doing. So one of the habits is called fulfillment, or joy in the journey. And she said, I really love making this salsa, and I really loved, she really loved serving, and she loved that idea of making food and things for people. So she actually started a business, and she's very successful in it now. And so that, I look back at that and I think to myself, just that first conversation I had and the emotional pain that person was in to where they are right now, it's just like night and day. So I've seen a lot of people. My mom would probably love for me to share her story. She's a Tiny Habits coach. My mom is 88 years old.
Oh, gosh.
And she went through my program, and she said that she was feeling old lady feelings and had lost her self-confidence. And I didn't think much of it. I did a webinar one night, and there were not many people. And she said, maybe I should sign up for your class and just see. And I thought, okay, sure, why not? I didn't think anything of it. But now she does that work full time. She goes into senior centers around St. Louis and talks and speaks and does workshops, and she serves that community. So that, there's a lot of stories I could share, but I think those are two that really stand out in my mind.
So self-confidence declines as you age. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
And that's normal, huh?
Absolutely. So her business is called Thrive After 65.
Cute.
Yes.
And so what are tiny habits that she teaches at that age? So
for anybody that's read the book Atomic Habits, so it's based on James Clear's philosophy, and there's a whole methodology that came from Stanford University. So that's where it all originated, and so it's just that foundational thought, and that biggest focus is about just doing one thing a day you don't want to do, or celebrating more. So it's a little bit more step by step, break it down into simpler
which we can really apply at any age.
Absolutely.
I just reread that book last month. And
did you? Okay.
I did. And it was one of those things. My mom has one of those, not an elliptical, one of those redactor bikes. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
And at 85, she's on there 30 minutes a day. And I thought, why can't I do that? And I just and I've got it sitting in the family room. I just never sit on it.
I get it.
And I keep thinking, okay, if I do 1 minute, and then I do 2 minutes the next day, and 3 minutes. Maybe someday I can do it as long as my 85-year-old mother does.
Yes.
She's such an inspiration to me. But I do think those little tiny habits that you change. So I could see that in progression. But again, looking back and looking at habits that we've created that we don't know we've created, and how do we put closure to them. I see it a lot with, especially for me, with clients when a spouse passes away, and they're so used to doing things a certain way, whether that was how they divided the household responsibilities, was it how they went to bed in the evening, was it, no matter what it was, and having to change that habit when you go through that significant transition. So I think not only do we have to look at making those changes when we're trying to improve ourselves or improve our career, but when life happens to us, now we have to recognize, wait, we were ingrained in these habits, and now all of a sudden what do we do? I have a client who was a dear client for over 20 years, and he passed away. And when his wife came in for a meeting later, she said, right now my only focus is how am I going to get to sleep every night without him next to me? Okay. And I thought, again, just every little basic thing that you're so used to. I have another client who's in her late 80s, and we were talking with the adult children about, when do we need to start thinking about next living situation as we kind of age and go through that care continuum. And she said, I'm not leaving my house because I can get up in the middle of the night and go to the bathroom, and I know where every countertop is and where every light switch is without the lights on, and I know what light is going to shine in from outside. And she said, I don't want that to change. I'm safe. I know exactly where everything is. And I hadn't thought about that, because you usually think people are afraid of change.
Right.
But when you realize for her, it was a safety issue that she didn't want to change that habit.
Exactly.
And so I love kind of the deep dive into why we do what we do.
Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. How do you apply that when you look at at sales, when you talk to those people?
Yeah, that's a great question, Karen. So with sales, it's interesting because the program I teach is based on some of the philosophies are based on a book called The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. And so I don't want to say that my program was originally a sales program, but some of the core principles come from that book. And so
certainly confidence.
Yes, confidence. And really in the back of that book, for the audience, if you haven't read it, it's a really great paperback. You can get on Amazon. And at the back of the book, there's these 10 scrolls, and they're 10 ways of being effective in sales or leadership, or as I say, the best version of yourself. So the program itself, and how does it tie into sales? I think the biggest pieces of that is that I learned in my sales career that it takes, again, self-confidence to really be good at what you're doing. And I think personally that's probably one of the reasons that people either choose not to do sales, or it's why they quit, is it's either the rejection or it's the pressure or the stress that it brings. And once I figured that out, I joined Toastmasters. I went to Tony Robbins. I went to workshop seminars. I mean, I've always been into self-development since I was 9, since that accident. But I realized that there is a big tie between being the best version of yourself and serving other people. And those are two of the core foundations of selling. And I never realized it until I went through this program and put it all together. So that's where I call this philosophy, I call it the bicycle model. The front wheel of a bicycle is about your skills and your tactics and making the calls. The back wheel is about your thought habits, your confidence, your determination, your accountability, some of the things that we've been talking about today. So it really takes both of those wheels being in balance to be effective in sales, in my experience.
That's a great visual. And I love reminding people that sales is about serving others. And I think those that go in to serve themselves don't last very long. I think, clients and customers pick up on that quickly. And that, living that value of, being a servant leader certainly helps sales, and finding the right solutions for your clients makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely, yes.
So you've gone through that trifecta of transition, as you said, and really come out good on the back end, you would say?
Yes, the trifecta, I forgot to mention in the beginning. So it was, again, ending a relationship, moving back to St. Louis. And the one thing I did not mention during that time was I also got laid off from a very big company. They got bought by a private equity firm, released the sales leadership team, which I was part of. So it was like the career change as well. So coming out from all that, I just remember doing the self-reflection, and when all that was happening, I remember I was at a Tony Robbins event in Los Angeles, and this was like the spring of 2018. My house was on the market, getting ready to move back to St. Louis, and I just remember saying, there must be a reason all this is happening. I don't know what it is, God, but I'm just going to trust that there is a bigger plan, a bigger path for me, and I didn't react. And then the next day I got notified I got a really nice package, so it allowed me to move back, start my business and coaching, and then I eventually went to work at another company for a while before I went on my own as a sales trainer. But I think part of this is we sometimes need to remember, whether you believe in God, Buddha, the universe, whoever or whatever that higher power is that there is always a plan for us, and that we need to just trust that plan even when it's uncomfortable, because on the other side of a breakdown is always a breakthrough. That's the way I look back on my life. I mean, everything that hasn't gone right, something better's come out of it. And it's hard to remember that in the moment sometimes.
It's very hard to remember that, and very hard to be patient. I'm not great with patience, and I always find that if you just give it a hot minute, something happens that helps you make that decision. Something happens that unfolds, and and things become clear. And when we talk about going through transitions and ultimately getting to some clarity and confidence, it does kind of rev you up for that next stage, because we know these things are going to keep happening. We know they're going to happen to us, or we're going to initiate that change. But having, kind of planning as much as we can, and having that preparation, and the faith component, to your point, whatever your faith is, your spirituality, your mantra, holding on to that and keeping something grounded, I think really helps you navigate through that transition much quicker than kind of getting stuck in the quicksand. When you look at that trifecta, I mean, you could have stayed right in Chicago and feet ingrained in concrete and not moved anywhere, and wallowed in self-pity, oh, woe is me. Right. But, you never even mentioned a speck of that. You took it completely the opposite direction, took control of it, educated yourself, looked at yourself differently, looked at your habits differently, and that ended up being your career.
Right. I mean,
when you put all the pieces together, it's truly amazing.
A great summary. I never thought of it that way.
Pull it all together.
Yeah.
Do you have other things that you could share with the listeners that were helpful for you as you go through this transition? Any other books or tips that might help them as they're going through something like this?
Sure. I mean, one of the mantras I live by is that the best investment we can ever make is in ourselves. So, we've all heard that saying, to surround yourself with positive, like-minded people. So getting involved in groups, networking. And then as far as books that I've read, one of my favorite books is Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within. That has been my go-to for many. I've read that book many times. Also, The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. And there is also just reading, listening.
Sure.
I'm a big Audible listener, but I think those were some of the first decisions I made. And I had a coach. I had a habit finder coach in my life during this transition who was coaching me through it. And I also, when I first started my business, I had a business coach. So I am a true believer. When I give my sales speech, I talk about the year I almost got fired from my sales job and hired a sales coach. So I'm a true believer in sales coach. That helped me save my career, but it also got me to see that coaching is really something that it really can change your life.
Right.
And I'm a big believer in it.
I have a business coach that I've used over the past couple of years, and I never had before. And it just opened your eyes to other opportunities, other ways of looking at how you're doing what you're doing. They bring together a resource that you otherwise might not have exposure to. So I do think it's good to have that partnership and that alignment with somebody outside of your inner circle.
Yes.
That brings that perspective. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you for coaching, what is the best way to do so?
Sure. Well, on my website, you can schedule a complimentary discovery call. It's aimwithamy.com.
Okay.
And that's where you can see more about what I do. And then again, if there's interest in having a discussion, all my contact information is there, or you can just book it right there online.
Perfect. Well, Amy, thank you so much for sharing your story, and thank you for the service that you provide. I'm sure you have been extremely impactful to many salespeople as well as non-salespeople. So we appreciate you sharing the story. This is Karen Maurer with Her Next Chapter, and we look forward to hearing and talking with you next week.